Today's daf is daf Yud Gimel. Just a quick recap. The Mishnah said that if a city has Avodah Zarah and they have a market day during that time when they have their celebrations, and we're not, even though we said before you're not allowed to buy and sell the day of their celebration, the Chutz La'aretz, or that's all 3 days. But here we're talking about a case, as Rashi explains, that if you are buying from them something which is non-perishable, you're allowed to, because they're not very happy that they had to sell. Usually, the sellers have to sell, so they're not very happy, and therefore you're allowed to. So it says like this: there were two kinds of stalls, because they just lost an item, even though they made some money on it. They just lost an item. So we have two kinds of stalls. You have stalls that are decorated with fruits and all that, and you have stalls that are not decorated. The stalls that are decorated means that the money you give them, part of it goes to Avodah Zarah, or in fact, as Rashi says, they're owned by the church and so on. So you're helping them out. But stalls that are not decorated means they're not giving Avodah Zarah, they're not participating in whatever the events are. So you can buy from them. Some Rishonim, the Ritva and the Rashba hold that the only time you're allowed to buy from non-decorated stalls are if there are also decorated ones. So then that's an obvious indication that these don't pay tax. But if there are no decorated ones, then they all pay tax. You can't buy many of them. Rashi and others disagree. They say that no, regardless. So if it's not decorated, means they're not participating, you're allowed to buy. The Shlokish comes along and says that that the reason why you're not allowed to buy here is it's decorated with let's say roses, or decorated with myrtles, so you're enjoying, and they themselves are Avodah Zarah. These things were given to Avodah Zarah to create an ambiance, so therefore you are having hana from it, you're smelling the fragrance. But there's no problem in being mahana, in actually, giving money, whatever it is, towards that. That's not a problem. You're allowed to be mahana, according to what simple talking about it. According to Rabbi Yochanan, not only surely Madach, you're not allowed to have hana, and where there's a bit of a loss to them, to the going, and yet you're not allowed to have hana. Surely you're not allowed to be mahana. You're not allowed to give them anything that's going to help them out. So we're up to the Tosfos here. Sorry, the Gemara, 3 lines on top of the page. Tosfos does say that even according to the Shlokish, that if it's giving him a lot of hana, it's forbidden. It's only if giving him a little hana that is permitted. Or Tosfos says you're not allowed to give hana, even according to Shlokish, you're not allowed to give hana to go. But over here, because what it used to be is that if you were participating in the whole event, they would put a crown on your head, like a wreath or something, to show that you're part of it. But because you're not putting on that wreath, and instead you'll say you're paying taxes, so at the same time that you're giving hana, you're insulting them. You don't want to participate. So that kind of hana, Reish Lakish says you're permitted to do, not a full-blown hana to the Avodah Zarah from you. But now we're going to ask a question. Meisvei will ask a question on Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says you're allowed to give hana. Rab Nasser name in 3 lines of the says Yom Shavayis Chachavim. There's a day that the Avodah Zarah maneches boyas hameches, the day that they discount the taxes. Machris, and this is the proclamation of Megillah. They say, "Kol mishen neitla Torah v'yanet b'roishay u'v'roishchem." Prepare to take this crown, a wreath of flower, it is, and place it on their head, the head of the donkey, and honor the Avodah Zarah. Will discount or reduce or remove the tax. But if not, so now a Yehudi, a Jew who's there, it finds on a conundrum. Why is it conundrum? Asks what you do. If he places the wreath on his head, then he's benefiting from them. What's the benefit? Very interesting. Rashi says the benefit is nimtzanen. What's the benefit? You're going to have the fragrance of the wreath on your head. The benefit is you're not paying the taxes. So the Rishonim explain in Rashi the reason why that's not called a benefit is, some Rishonim will agree with Rashi, why that's not called a benefit is because it's your money. I'm not getting anything from them. I'm just keeping what's mine. That's not called a benefit. Others, I totally disagree with that. They say the fact that you don't have to pay your money, normally you would, that in itself is the benefit. But so listen, if you're going to try to get out of the tax by placing the wreath on your head, that's a benefit. You can't do that. It's not what you do. So lo yinech, you don't place it. So then what happens? You're going to be giving money to the church. Nimtza mahana. Either or, you're in trouble. So clearly, what the point we're bringing in from here is against Reish Lakish, that you're not allowed to give money to them. Covered. That's covered. Yeah. That's what some Rishonim say. What it is, not like Rashi, that the smell. Nimmt him out, and we learn now how nice of a nice. So what do you do now? So the fact of the matter is, it's forbidden either way. So how nice of somebody could go ahead and does do purchases. Behema, we penalize you for doing that, and we therefore are not going to disallow you from having any benefit. So if it's a behema, okay, we're going to uproot it. As we will explain how we do that. Paydays if you have fruits or clothing or kalim or earthenware, yirku, let it rot. You don't have any benefit. Mois money. When we say throw them in Yam HaMelech, why do we say Yam HaMelech? Because there's two. If you throw it in other rivers, you can do that as well, but then you have to grind it and make sure that nobody can never use it. If you throw it in Yam HaMelech, you can throw it in intact because nobody goes to Yam HaMelech. No ship can go there, no boat can go there. Nobody can ever recover it if we had another Gemara. So therefore, you toss it into Yam HaMelech. How do you do this uprooting? From the knee below, you remove the tendons. In other words, the animal can't walk as fast anymore, and so on. Like Tony Mias, we learned, however, Yoniach. It says this clearly here, Yoniach, if what? If you place it on your head, Nimtza, then you will have an But Loyin, if you don't place it on your head, Nimtza Mehane. That you're what? You're giving them pleasure from you. Clearly, you're not allowed to. I'm going to massage because some of the sluggish holds. That's true. That's a nosen holds. But pligi rabbanon alei did a nosen. The sluggish of the opinion rabbanon argue. Van no dam rabbanon. The pligi and the sluggish says I side with the rabbanon. Rabbi Yechon, however, says like pligi I hold the rabbanon actually not arguing. Says the Gemara like pligi the rabbanon not arguing. But Tanya look the Braisa holchin leyarid, and we're going to prove Rabbi Yechon knew of this Braisa. That's the point. He knew of this following brisa, and then you see clearly, as we're going to see in a minute, that they argue with Reb Nosson. Like Rish Lakish Taka says, you go to the fair of the Goyim, you can buy from them behema, avodim, you can buy an animal and slaves and shroches and maids, botim, vesodas, vekramim, and houses and fields and vineyards, vekoisiv, umayl, because you'll even like documented, and go to their churches, even though you're honoring them on this day. Nevertheless, you'll do that because you have to protect yourself. You're protecting that the guy later shouldn't deny that he was sold to you. Furthermore, if you're a kohen, if you're a kohen, you're allowed to. In Chutz we had a gezerah that up for ha'amim, the dust of the sand of Chutz La'aretz is tummy for kohen. We don't want a kohen to go out. Nevertheless, in this particular case, to save your money, you're allowed to. The London they argue against you and they say that to save your money, you're allowed to go. Just like you can go to Chutz La'aretz, which is the Isa the Rabbanon, will dispense that to save your money. You also can go, a kohen can walk into the cemetery. And before we go any further, Gemara jumps on it. The Beis HaKvoros a kohen is not permitted to go to the Beis HaKvoros. What do you mean? Just to save your money, you're allowed to go? The Beis HaPras the Rabbanon. The Beis HaPras is an area that we knew once upon a time there was a body there, and it was plowed over. And the question is whether the plow hit where the body was. And we say that there's a possibility now in an area of 100 amas in all directions. There's a possibility that there's a bone the size of a lentil that the kohen might come across. I mean, the bone is forbidden, but we suspend that law. We had in our brachas to meet a king royalty. You're allowed to, we remove the rule. We'll move it here as well and say that you're allowed to cross the base of process. The kohen needs to save his money. Umetame, and so too he's permitted to go to the base of pras, lilmoid Torah. If he wants to learn Torah, at least he should marry a woman. Why these? No, if he wants to go, you're allowed to go to Chutz La'aretz, for example. To marry a woman for kohen to go to Chutz La'aretz is also the Rabbanon, not to learn Torah. But these are cardinal mitzvahs, as Tosfos learns. We know that these are the most important mitzvahs. But the most fascinating thing is this Tosfos here. I'll quote you inside because it's unbelievable to understand what I mean. But if you give them the very last line that could normally be learned Talmud Torah Kulam or Gadol Maisa maybe Gadol Torah Limud maybe they Maisa and Pruvu as we said like Torah more and Barbasta for Gimel or in the beginning of other Chagiga Leila Torah Bra El Sheves Yitzara or Gittin that the whole purpose of creation is to procreate. But look what he brings here. Ava b'she'iltas the Rabbachoy. In Rabbachoy is she'iltas. He's going him. Sometimes we bring down Shas commentations. Mefurish there explains Hanoch dekili that Talmud Torah is one of the easiest mitzvahs, and getting married is the easiest mitzvahs. Choshken l'shar mitzvahs shem chashuvas. If somebody can explain what that means, that'll be quite interesting. They send you off to someone here, but didn't have a chance to look it up. Fascinating shilta. Anyhow, back to the Gemara. So it's easy to learn Torah. No excuse not learning Daf Yomi every day. It's a lenient mitzvah, a light mitzvah, light. Light can be either physically to do or light mitzvah in the laws of what does it mean by light? When do we allow a kohen to go chutz la'aretz if he can't find to learn in Eretz Yisrael? If you can learn in Eretz Yisrael, what excuse do you have to go to chutz la'aretz? Rabbi disagrees. Even though teachers are available in Eretz Yisrael, you can go. Not everyone is you have to have a mazel. You got to find the right teacher that you feel comfortable with. There's thousands of Daf Yomi shirim out there, literally thousands of Yomi shirim. Everybody finds their own shir that they feel comfortable with, and nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a story. Yosef HaKohen, he was a Kohen. So all the Chachar went after his teacher in Chutz La'aretz to say then in order to learn Torah. And now, what's the question here? The fact that Rabbi Yechon said Allah Rabbi Yossi means that Rabbi Yechon was aware of this brisa. And here it says clearly you're allowed to purchase, and by purchasing you're giving them money, and then part of the money goes taxes to the government. So it's clear that Rabbi Shlakish is right, and Rabban are arguing. Rabbi Nosson, I'm a plea that Rabban are arguing. I want Rabbi Yechon know. I tell you, there's two kinds of merchants. There's people, there's a proper retailer, and they pay taxes and everything else. And then you have somebody who sells in the home, they open the backyard sales and everything else. Private people, they don't pay taxes. And well, this price when it says you're allowed to buy on the day, it's talking about not from a retailer. It's talking about from a private person. So they're not paying taxes, therefore you're allowed to. Buying from a retailer, and they take taxes from them, it's forbidden. If you're buying from a private person, they don't pay taxes. So there's no argument on Nosson and the second price here because they're talking about two different scenarios. Let's understand what the penalties that Rab Nosson said. Behemoth, when it comes to an animal, when it comes to animal, you uproot the animal. But you can tzabalachaim. How can you do that? When you're pulling out the tendons, you're doing tzabalachaim. It says in Pasuk, es susayim te'oker. It says that by Yeshua that you should remove the tendons from the horses to weaken the horses. So we see that when you're doing the right thing, you're allowed to. No, there's no tzabal chaim if it's for a higher cause, and therefore in this case, the Chacham decides you penalize, you can do that. So Teisha asks a question. Maybe that Yeshua has special instructions to Eibishter. Same Eibishter said you're not allowed to tzabal chaim. So in this case you're allowed to. But and now the question is this: according to one who said tzabal chaim deraisa, if it's tzabal chaim derabban, he can tell you when yes, when no. But if tzabal chaim deraisa, Yeshua is different. Eibishter told me you could do it. We should do it. But when it comes over here, how can the Chacham say we're going to penalize you for purchasing from them? And because we're going to penalize you, we're going to do Isa Tzabal Chaim Deraisa. Teisha says another fascinating thing, because the general rule is that Chachamim can overturn the Torah Sheval Taisa. Be passive. Don't blow shofar and Rosh Hashanah falls on a Shabbos. They're always telling you in the Sheval Taisa. But Kuma say to go ahead and actively go against the Torah. No. Teisha says here, I'll quote you here. The Teisha says, now what are we doing here? We're actually going to remove the tendons, which are going to be violating Tzabal Chaim Deraisa. Teisha says, Amar Abaya, the third line, Teisha says, Shleimit, the Vadai, surely, she has Koyach B'Yodam, the rabbis have the power, Lakar, to remove a Isa Deraisa of Tzabal Chaim in an active way. Well, that's what you're doing here. Heichad Tam Tzas. Lakar. And you don't even need a strong, compelling reason. If they see the slightest reason to go ahead and to actively be oiked the horse because we want to penalize them for Avodah Zarah, they can do that. An amazing thing. Unless we want to say that when it comes to matter of Avodah Zarah, that is very different than all the other Averis in church. We end up studying the whole sugya there in Yibamis about what the powers of Chamim are. So maybe that's what it is. Okay, setting on it further. What's the you said Menashe Parsesem. You take from the knee below. Why not the knee above? So Rashi says because you're not allowed to make an animal treif. And all the Rishonim jump on Rashi. What Isa is to make an animal treif? Kachim, you're not allowed to make treif. Why is it Isa making an animal treif? What's that all about? And they have other explanations. So the Gemara, but I mean, I'll ask a question. A Magdishin today with no base of Mikdash, you shouldn't be allowed to go ahead and make things and consecrate things, because what do you do with it? It's going to be a stumbling block. It'll be sitting around. You can't do anything with it. There's no remedy, and you might end up eating it. A machrim no can you make a chedim? The machlekes we had and we'll have in the future. If chedim is it goes to the koinim or goes to the bedek habayis, if we're talking about a case where chedim goes to the bedek habayis, what do you do with it? There's no base of English today. The ma'arich no can you say that the value of that person? I'm gonna donate, because again the same problem. Where are you gonna donate to? Bisman hazeh, but if he did it, we have to get rid of it. So behemoth okay, we are going to again uproot it and paid its crucifixion equal will rot, and mois v'chol melech. The Azer but here this is our problem. Here it says by Kachim, it says how do you uproot it? Is noel del b'fnah. You put it in the pen, lock the door, and let it slowly die from starvation. He makes him die for itself. Our Gemara says what's equal, you just remove a few tendons below the knee. And over here it says that you let it die. There's much more difficult because kachim, and by kachim, we don't want by kachim to go ahead and to do a mum and to go ahead and pull out the tendons. So therefore, we close the door. And the thing is, when you pull out the tendons, it doesn't die. It'll take a long, long time before it dies. I think, well, you have kachim there that you've maimed, and therefore, saying to die from hunger, it takes a few days, it'll die. So that's the average question. So when I ask the question, they make it quicker. Just kill the animal. Why let it die on its own? Kill the animal. There's no bezoin anymore at all. You know why we don't suggest that? Because mishchit also b'dei takala. Mishchit also b'dei takala. The problem is that if you shecht it, people think, oh, it's kosher meat, and go ahead and eat it. So we have to prevent that as well. So the Gemara says, so don't shecht it in the proper way. Cut it down in half, dissect it, and therefore everyone is straight. And this way, there's no bezoin, there's nothing lingering. It's over straight away. So the Gemara, you should destroy when you go to destroy all their idols and destroy their animals that they use for all these things in a destructive way. And then it concludes with I don't want you to be in a destructive way when it comes to Hashem. So we can't just go ahead and do gistra and cut it in half. Rabbi gives us an answer. He says the reason why we don't do, why we close the door for it and we let it die. Neshanira, if we're going to do the other way of taking out the tendons, it appears kematul mumbekachin. It appears as if you are, inflicting a wound on a korban. Says the Gemara. What do you mean nida mumalye? What do you mean nida mumalye? It's actually a real mum. Interesting. First thing Mother wants to know, why don't we just take out the tendons? And then the Mother says, what do you mean it's only a problem to Rabban? So he says, the right to take out the tendons. So what are we asking in the first place? Anyway, they're saying, according to you, Rava, that you think is called a mum, even though there's no base of Migdash, then that's mamashimut nida. No, he says, why it's nida? Because hani mili is man shabase Migdash kaya. In the times of base of Migdash, the chazi lahakrava is suitable to be makrib. But today, because it's not suitable based on English, there's no real drama here at all, no issue. That's an interesting question. So today, firstborn animal, we wait till it has a mum and everything else. Why don't we worry about this whole thing? Yeah, you might come eat and all that. Why don't you just lock it up and let it die? Because right now, what we do is we wait till it has a mum, and then we do whatever we do. So he said the difference is that there's a knas here. You didn't do anything. It just happened. Over there, you were makdish it. You were machim it. Today, there's no base of meetings. Why'd you do that? So therefore, we penalize you. But that by B'chai, nothing really happened. Yeah, and Rashi establishes here some of the Shem hold that why don't we treat that as chutei chutz when we ask why can't you buy it? Why don't we just shecht it? How can you shecht a korban? Remember you consecrated it. So Rashi wants to say because it's because a bedek habayis, and this for the no chutei chutz. Others say there's no chutei chutz at all. Even if it's real korban, even if it's a real korban today, when there's no base on Migdash, shechting it is not a problem of chutei chutz. Because chutei chutz is only, he could have brought it into the base of Migdash, he didn't. But today you can't do that. Anyway, getting back to Rava. So the Gemara says, if so, you're telling me that there's no base of Migdash today. It's like there's already a mum. Why don't we just then say you're not allowed to do that, taking the tendon? Because it has the din is if an animal already a korban already has a mum, you don't want to inflict a second mum on it. Okay, the animal has a natural mum because there's no base of Migdash, and now you're going ahead and you're going to make a second mum. How can you do that? Awesome. So he says it balmum when it comes to a case of a balmum, you're not allowed to inflict a second mum. You cannot bring it to the base of midrash. You can sell it with the money. It still has a connection to the base hamikdash. And if you're not allowed to do it, here you can't do anything. You turn it into money. You still can't use it on the base of midrash. You can't do anything with it whatsoever. um, Achar bin Rabbi Lloyd copies to the Tzur. Rabbi Yonah met Rabbi Lloyd sang at the doorway of the city of Tzur and entered the Tzur, retire. I'm like, Tony Behema. Okay, it says here by Behema what the remedies. We penalize you for buying Behema from Goyim. We remove the tendons. Evid might. Says here, if you buy an Evid also, it's wrong. So what do we do? What's the punishment we do to an Evid? Or what penalty do we do for an Evid? So he says, according to Abnosam, we penalize. What do we do? Yisrael, every Yisrael, I have no question of Yisrael, because you don't really own it. Nothing you could do. What about a goy? What's your question? Tani we learned a goy. And those who shepherd animals, so they're naturally they're always considered ganavim if they're using their own animals, not somebody else's animals, because they're getting pasture in other people's fields, so they're ganavim. If they fall into you're not allowed to throw them into a pit and kill them, but if they fall in, you can take the ladder where you don't have to help them out. So you're not allowed to kill them. So what's the question by Evid? What do you want to do? Want to kill the Evid? You can't do that. What do you want to lock them up in a pen and close the door? You can't do that. It says, it says that if you bought from them these things, you're not allowed to. Evid Yisrael, you're talking about Evid Yisrael, or even talking about a goyish Evid as well. If it's a goy, in other words, in the second price it says you're allowed to buy. Remember the Rabbanon's price says you're allowed to buy all of these things on the day of the holidays. Now all of these things you're buying because there's some benefit for it, and the way it actually in most of them learn some mitzvah you can do with it. But in Ever Kanani, what possible mitzvah, what possible that you can do with it? Why would we allow you in the second price to purchase? No, I feel even though we're not evangelical, and here you're forcing the Eved to undergo a conversion. Nevertheless, the fact that as Sage explains, he's doing mitzvahs like a woman, Lola Misha, it's a good thing. We're doing a benefit for that person, so therefore you're allowed to. The second Bryce says you're allowed to buy, not the Nos's Bryce, but the second one, Loichin, you're allowed to buy these things. I mean, even the second Bryce says you're allowed to buy because you're buying from a private balabos. It's only things which have a benefit, the Tzedek Mitzvah. So over the Rashi says, "Otu behema my machzor was chinika." So what about behema? It says you're allowed loichin behema. You tell me you're only allowed to do things when it's positive. What's about behema? What shchina are you doing there? Ela mishemuta. You're allowed to buy from them not because you're allowed to buy things that you're going to use for a mitzvah. You're allowed to buy because they're sad, because they just lost whatever it is that you just bought from them. Even though they got some money for it, but they no longer own the commodity. And if it goes up in value, they no longer have any benefit from it. So there's a certain loss here. So that's why Evid also. Not because necessarily you're making a mitzvah, because maybe it's not called a mitzvah when you're forcing the Evid to go through this whole experience. Second, Rabbi Yaakov, Zavin, Sandler, Rabbi Yaakov's, he bought a shoe from a guy. And Abiyim is over pizza. Abiyim bought bread. Teacher wants to know how can Abiyim buy bread? It's a pasakum. So either there's no pas yisrael available, or he's buying it for his avodim or for his behemoths. One guy said to his friend, Yasma, it's like a generation we have no teachers. You're like an orphan. What your Rebbe Taka did this, and you went and bought things on the day of in the marketplace of Avodah Zarah. What are you buying over here, sandal? Each one thought that the other one was doing the wrong thing. But the reason why they did it, both of them, the Balabai is over. We said before, from Balabai, it's allowed to buy. And not only Tzarech Mitzvah, but Stam you're allowed to buy because Memai from them. But each one, it's amazing. Each one did the same thing, and for themselves, they knew why they're doing it, but they were very accusatory when it came to the Chaver. What is this? With the Kolodon Kafschus. And this is the worst possible scenario. B'shas, they're doing it themselves. They decide, I'm good. You are no good. You're a Yosem. Amazing. Must be something going on with it. But anyway. Each one accused the other one of buying it from a retailer. Could be said for if you're not allowed to buy from a retailer, from a merchant, the chocolate mix and they pay taxes and you're benefiting the Avodah Zarah. They're buying chocolate mix, so they don't pay taxes and mutter is permitted. Abba the son of Abba said, today, the one who came out saying, now will be Mahana. Zimna, this time, today, even private individuals no longer get away with this, immunity. Even private individuals have to pay tax. I feel Balabais, he would have banned then even buying it from a private citizen. El Inu So how did they do it then? If you're telling me that even today, even a private citizen, they pay taxes, so how can they buy? Even private people, but that's if they open every Sunday and they have these flea markets. But if it's just ad hoc, you open a garage sale, that definitely don't pay taxes. Still permitted. Mishnah. Eilu dvarim, the following things, asurim limka, you're not allowed to sell to a goy because they're going to use it for Avodah Zarah, and the Gemara is going to explain each one. Is trubulin, we're going to see later some fruits from the cedar tree. Ubenoiz shuach, it's white dates of cedar water. Upotaitis, if it's still attached to a stem. Ulavoina and frank incense, which is always used for Avodah Zarah. The tanaga loven, and a white chicken. Rabbi Yehuda, as Rita says, Mutalim Tanagolov, you're allowed to sell them a Tanagolov, provided if you sell them a whole group of chickens, and including that is white, he wasn't really picky or fussy. He just happened to give them a whole group of white black mixed, no problem. Obviously, it's not about Avodah. It seems that white chicken was used for Avodah Zarah. And this is also with Yom Kippurim by Kaparis. We'll talk about tomorrow. What happens if it's on its own? Let's say all you have is white chickens, then make sure that it's missing a limb, because goyim, even though they weren't so particular about a flaw, a defect like we are, but a missing limb for them is also an issue. Make sure that you render it useless; it cannot be used for Avodah Zarah. Then you can sell to him. Because what are you worried about? They can use it for their idol worshiping, but they don't use an animal or a bird that's minus a limb. Vishar koladvorim, anything else. Staman, if they buy it, stam mutter. And you don't have to automatically assume will be used for Avodah Zarah. These things in the Mishnah are generally used for Avodah Zarah. Other things, stam, they're buying it even around that time period. It's all right, you can sell them. But Pirusha, they clearly tell you that you can use it for Avodah Zarah, then also forbidden. And Meir says, Avdekel Tov, the Chatzah, we'll see what these things are, is also Limkel Chavim, these things are also to a goy. Very quickly, at least the first one, my Yistrabulin, what's an Yistrabulin? So we say Yistrabulin is Tunisa, some kind of a cedar tree. But Aminu, we ask a question, it says, Hayisifu Alein, they added regarding Shemitah, Alachsin, Yistrabulin, Muchsasin, Uvenoi Shuach. It says they added these things here that are, but Shemitah that's forbidden. Avisagat Yistrabulin is Tunisa, some kind of a cedar tree. Tunisa Meisa B'Shvius is that the law by Shvius is only a tree that has roots that continue growing. But if every time the roots die during the winter, like a banana tree, every time it's a new thing, every time the roots die, it's not considered a tree as far as this is concerned. If it's Tunisa Meisa B'Shvius, that cloud kosh yeshli iked, if it has roots, yeshli Shvius. That the roots can sustain a winter period, then there's Shemitah. And so he says, Rashi gives examples like cucumbers and melons and similar. But if it does not sustain, last the winter, English shviz, no do Shemitah with it, and therefore you're allowed to sell it and commercialize it on Shemitah. You don't have to make it hefker. Payday the arzer. Not talking about the cedar tree itself. We're talking about the fruits. And Rashi says golnut, the fruits of a cedar tree, some kind of fruit. These are the things that they used to use for Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to sell to them. And B'nai Shuach, white figs. Upetitis, what's a third species called petitis? As the Gemara, it's not a third species. Only if they're there attached to their stem. And if they're attached to the stem, you're not allowed to sell them. Why? Because that's what they used to use for Avodah Zarah. But if it's missing the stem, they wouldn't use Avodah Zarah, and then there's no problem at all. And we'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, have a good day.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.